Let me tell you what it's like growing up as the forgotten child. I'm Haley, and I've got an older sister named Monica. She's 2 years older than me, and honestly, sometimes it felt like she was the only child in our family. Monica got the new stuff, and I got whatever she was done with. Her old phone when she got upgraded, her old shoes when she outgrew them, her old laptop when she got a better one. It wasn't like we were poor or anything. My parents just didn't think I needed new things of my own. My grandmother, my mum's mom, she was the only one who really saw what was going on. She'd come over, take one look at me in Monica's hand-me-downs, and her face would get all pinched like she'd tasted something sour. "Come here, sweetheart," she'd say, pulling me aside when my parents weren't looking. She always had an envelope with some money in it. "Get yourself something nice, okay? Something that's just yours." Grandma was loaded. Everyone knew that. She lived in this big house on the other side of town and always dressed real fancy. But it wasn't just about the money with her. She actually cared about me. She'd ask about school, about my friends, about what I liked to do. Basic stuff that parents are supposed to ask, but mine never did. By the time I hit 15, I was just done with it all. Done with waiting for my parents to notice me. Done with wearing Monica's castos. Done with being the family ghost. So I went and got myself a job at this cafe downtown, working the checkout counter. Sure, it wasn't glamorous, taking orders, running the register, cleaning tables, but every dollar I earned was mine. No hand-me-downs, no leftovers, no waiting for Monica to get tired of something before I could have it. The funny thing is, after a while, I actually started to prefer it this way. At least when I bought my own stuff, I didn't have to feel grateful for getting someone else's scraps. Grandma was the only one who seemed to get it. She'd come to visit me at work sometimes, order a coffee, and just sit there, beaming at me like I was doing something amazing. Monica's 18th birthday was supposed to be this huge celebration of her stepping into adulthood. Mom and Dad went all out for the party. They rented this fancy venue downtown, hired caterers, and invited pretty much every relative we had. I helped set up the decorations that morning, watching Mom fuss over every little detail. By evening, the place was packed with aunts, uncles, cousins, you name it. Monica was floating around in this expensive new dress, accepting congratulations like some kind of princess at her coronation. I stood off to the side in my nicest hand-me-down dress, trying to blend into the wallpaper. The big moment came after dinner. Dad clinked his glass and stood up, beaming with pride. "Everyone, we have a special announcement to make." Mom joined him, practically glowing. "As you all know, Monica has always been an exceptional student," she started. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. "And we're thrilled to announce that she'll be attending Preston University this fall." The room erupted in applause. Preston was one of those fancy private colleges where tuition probably cost more than most people's houses. "We've been saving for this since she was born," Dad added proudly. "And while it wasn't easy to afford such a prestigious school, nothing's too good for our girl." That's when Grandma stood up. I knew that look on her face. It was the same one she got whenever she caught Mom or Dad treating me like I was invisible. "Well, that's wonderful news," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "I'm very happy for Monica, but I have to ask, have you set aside the same amount for Haley's college education?" The silence in the room got even heavier. Mom and Dad looked like deer caught in headlights, staring at their shoes. "Oh, well," Mom stammered, her face flushing. "There's still plenty of time before Haley graduates high school." But Grandma wasn't letting it go. "That's not what I asked." "Well, to be honest," Mom said, trying to sound casual, "Haley isn't really college material. Her grades, she's not like Monica. She'll probably want to keep working at that cafe after graduation anyway." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, but before I could say anything, Grandma was pulling something from her purse. "You mean these grades?" She held up my latest report card, the one I'd shown her last week when I got straight A's, the one you'd know about if you ever bothered to ask your youngest daughter about school. The room was dead silent as she read out my grades, all A's with 1 A+ in chemistry. I watched my parents' faces go from red to white. We didn't know, Dad muttered. Exactly, Grandma's voice could have cut glass. You don't know anything about Haley because you're too busy fawning over Monica to notice your other daughter exists. Mom, please, my mother tried to interrupt. No, you need to hear this, Grandma continued. So what's the real reason you haven't saved for Haley's education? And don't lie to me, Sandra. I raised you better than that. My parents exchanged looks, and finally Dad cracked. We spent all our savings on Monica's tuition. The gasps from our relatives made me want to disappear into the floor, but Grandma wasn't done. So you've left nothing for your younger daughter. She shook her head in disgust. Well then, I'll tell you what's going to happen. I will pay for Haley's college education, every penny of it, because at least one adult in this family needs to treat these girls equally. I sat there, torn between wanting to hug my grandmother and wanting to run away from this whole mess. Monica was staring at her cake like it held the secrets of the universe, and my parents looked like they wished the ground would swallow them whole. After Monica's birthday party blew up, our house turned into an ice palace. Mom and Dad acted like I'd personally orchestrated the whole scene, like I'd somehow manipulated Grandma into exposing their favoritism. Monica packed up and left for Preston University that fall, taking with her all the warmth and conversation in our house. My parents walked around like ghosts, barely acknowledging my existence. Sometimes I'd catch them looking at me with this mixture of resentment and embarrassment, like I was the physical embodiment of their public humiliation. I kept working at the cafe, kept getting good grades, kept existing in that empty house. 2 years crawled by like this. When I graduated high school, I got accepted to State University. It wasn't Preston, but it was a good school, and more importantly, it was my ticket out. Grandma beamed with pride when I showed her my acceptance letter. My parents attended my graduation ceremony, but they might as well have been strangers. They didn't take any pictures, didn't throw a party, just handed me a card with a generic congratulations and went back to talking about how Monica, conquering Preston College, became my escape. I lived in the dorms during the semester and stayed with Grandma during breaks. Sure, I'd stop by my parents' house occasionally, usually for an hour or two, just to keep up appearances. These visits always followed the same script. I'd sit in the living room, and Mom and Dad would talk endlessly about Monica, how she had just graduated from Preston with honors and landed this amazing job at some prestigious firm, how she'd met this wonderful guy named Brad who worked in finance, how they were probably getting engaged soon. I just nodded and smiled, letting their words wash over me like background noise. What could I say? That I was doing well in my classes too. That I'd made the dean's list. That I had my own dreams and achievements. They'd never asked before, why would they start now? And Brad is just perfect for her, Dad would chime in. His family owns that big real estate company downtown. They're really going places together. More nodding from me, more silent smiling. It was easier this way. Let them live in their Monica-centered universe while I built my own life quietly in the background. Sometimes during these visits, I'd catch Grandma watching me with a knowing look. She understood why I stayed quiet, why I just let them ramble about Monica. Fighting for their attention had stopped being worth it a long time ago. How are your classes really going? She'd ask later, when we were back at her house, and I'd tell her everything about my professors, my projects, my dreams for the future. She'd listen with genuine interest, asking questions and offering advice. After graduating from State University, I landed a great job at a marketing firm. Finally, all those years of hard work were paying off. I had my own apartment, a good salary, and, best of all, complete independence from my parents. Life was going pretty well. Then came Monica's wedding. My parents outdid themselves, throwing this massive celebration that looked like something out of a bridal magazine. The venue was this historic mansion with perfectly manicured gardens. There was a string quartet for the ceremony, and the reception had everything from a gourmet 5-course dinner to an ice sculpture. I later found out they'd taken out a $200,000 loan to pay for it all. I kept my mouth shut about that. It wasn't my business how they spent their money. I just showed up, smiled for pictures, and genuinely felt happy for my sister. Monica looked beautiful, and her new husband, Brad, seemed like a nice guy. 2 years later, it was my turn. James, my boyfriend of 3 years, proposed, and I was over the moon. We threw a small engagement party at my favorite restaurant. Nothing fancy, just close friends, family, and of course, Grandma. Everything was going great until Grandma stood up to make a toast. I should have known something was coming. She had that look in her eye, the same one from Monica's 18th birthday party. "I'd like to say something to the happy couple," she began, but then turned to face my parents. "Sandra, Richard, you did such a wonderful job with Monica's wedding. It was absolutely beautiful. I'm sure you're planning something equally spectacular for Haley's big day." The room got quiet. My parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but under Grandma's steady gaze, they had no choice but to respond. "Of course," Mom said, forcing a smile. "We want both our daughters to have beautiful weddings." I tried to change the subject, but the damage was done. A few days later, Mom called me. "Haley, come over for dinner. We need to discuss wedding plans." I went, already dreading whatever was coming. James offered to come with me, but I told him I needed to handle this alone. "So, what are you thinking for the wedding?" Mom asked after we sat down at the dining room table. "Well, I started carefully. James and I want something small and intimate, just close family and friends, maybe 50 people max. I've actually worked out a budget already. We can do everything we want for about $25,000. We've been saving up." $25,000? Mom interrupted, looking horrified. "Absolutely not. That's not acceptable at all. We'll pay for the wedding, just like we did for Monica's. Don't worry about the cost. Pick whatever you like." I sat there stunned. After years of hand-me-downs and being the family afterthought, my mother was suddenly insisting on throwing me an extravagant wedding. Something didn't feel right, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. For the first time in my life, I felt like a real daughter to my parents. Every time Mom called about wedding details or Dad asked about venue options, I allowed myself to believe that things were finally changing. Maybe Grandma's interventions over the years had finally gotten through to them. Maybe they'd realize how unfairly they'd treated me all this time. The wedding day itself was everything I could have dreamed of. The venue was this beautiful lakeside resort with the ceremony set right by the water. The flowers were perfect, the food was amazing, and everyone seemed to be having a wonderful time. Even my parents appeared genuinely happy, mingling with guests and beaming with what looked like real pride. Grandma pulled me aside during the reception, her eyes sparkling. "This is exactly what you deserve, sweetheart," she said, hugging me tight. "I'm so glad your parents finally did right by you." She then went to thank my parents personally for giving me such a beautiful wedding. James and I left for our honeymoon feeling like we were floating on air. We spent a blissful week in Hawaii, not thinking about anything except each other and our future together. Then came the email. I was still unpacking from the honeymoon when my phone pinged. The subject line was simple: wedding expenses. I opened it, expecting maybe a final tally of what my parents had spent, something to satisfy my curiosity. Instead, there was an itemized bill for $100,000 with a note from my mother. "We trust. You'll handle this promptly," the email said. "Payment details attached." I stared at my phone screen for what felt like hours, my hands shaking. This had to be a mistake. They couldn't possibly. "James." My voice cracked as I called him over. "You need to see this." He read the email, his face going from confusion to shock to anger. "They're billing you after all their talk about wanting to give you the perfect wedding. This has to be a joke." But it wasn't a joke. The bill was real, and so was the expectation that we would pay it. We sat on our couch that evening, looking at our bank accounts, trying to make sense of it all. "We have the money," I finally said, my voice hollow. "The down payment we've been saving for the house." "We should talk to them first," James suggested. "Maybe there's been a misunderstanding." But I knew there hadn't been. This was classic mom and dad, building me up just to knock me down again. The only difference was that this time they'd waited until after the wedding to do it. I wrote the check for $20,000 with shaking hands. Our entire house down payment was gone in a single signature. But as I sealed the envelope, I felt something else besides the pain and betrayal, a kind of grim resolution. I'm done, I told James as I dropped the envelope in the mailbox. I'm done trying with them. I'm done hoping they'll change. I'm just done. What about your grandmother? He asked gently. Should we tell her? I shook my head. I can't. She was so happy at the wedding, so proud of them for finally treating you right. I can't bear to tell her what they did. That night, I lay awake thinking about all the signs I'd ignored. The sudden generosity, the insistence on an expensive wedding, the way they'd brushed aside my modest budget. I'd wanted so badly to believe they'd changed that I'd walked right into their trap. Life was just starting to feel normal again when Patricia showed up at our door unannounced one Sunday afternoon. She stood there with her trademark bright smile and a fruitcake that nobody would want to eat. "Hayley, darling," she trilled, pushing past me into our living room. "It's been ages. I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd pop by to see how married life is treating you." That was Aunt Patricia's way. She'd just pop by whenever she needed to refill her gossip reservoir. She was Dad's sister and the family's self-appointed information broker. If something happened in the family, Aunt Patricia would know about it before the people actually involved did. "Can I get you some coffee?" I offered, already knowing this wasn't going to be a quick visit. "Oh yes, dear, and then we can catch up properly." She settled onto our couch like she was preparing for a long interrogation session. "I haven't seen your parents in ages. How are they doing?" I busied myself with the coffee maker, trying to buy time. "I wouldn't know." Her voice went up an octave. "What do you mean, wouldn't know?" "They're your parents." "I don't talk to them anymore," I said simply, putting her coffee down. "But why?" She leaned forward, eyes gleaming with the prospect of fresh gossip. "They gave you such a beautiful wedding. Everyone's still talking about it." "I'd rather not discuss it." 2 days later, my phone started buzzing with messages from relatives. That's when I saw it, Patricia's Facebook post. It breaks my heart to see how ungrateful some children can be these days. Just visited my niece who told me she's cut off contact with her parents, the same parents who just gave her a gorgeous wedding. No respect for family anymore. Parents sacrifice everything for their children, and this is how they're repaid. Ungrateful children. Heartbroken. Family values. The comments started rolling in immediately. Distant relatives I hadn't seen in years were suddenly experts on my life, calling me ungrateful, spoiled, disrespectful. People who hadn't bothered to stay in touch were now tagging me in their responses, demanding explanations. But what really got me was my mother's comment. "It's true what they say, you never really know your children. Some show gratitude and appreciation for everything their parents do for them, while others, well, you can certainly tell the difference between my eldest and youngest daughters. Disappointed mother." I sat staring at my phone for hours, reading and rereading my mother's comment. Each word felt like a knife twist, especially that comparison between Monica and me. Finally, something inside me snapped. "Enough," I said out loud, startling James, who was working nearby. "I'm done being the bad guy in their story." My hands were shaking as I opened my filing cabinet and pulled out the check, the one I'd written to my parents. I took a photo of it, making sure the amount was clearly visible. $100,000. Then I started typing. Since everyone seems to have an opinion about my relationship with my parents, let me tell you the real story. Yes, they threw me a beautiful wedding. No, I didn't ask for it. In fact, I had planned a modest celebration with a $25,000 budget that I was going to pay for myself. They insisted on making it bigger, saying they wanted to treat me just like Monica. 1 week after the wedding, they sent me this bill for $100,000, 4 times my original budget. Here's the check I had to write them, using every penny of our house down payment savings. That's why I don't talk to my parents anymore. I hit post before I could change my mind and attached the photo of the check. The response was immediate. The same relatives who'd been calling me ungrateful just hours before were now posting shocked responses. Aunt Patricia's original post filled up with new comments, many from people demanding she take it down. My phone rang around dinner time. It was Grandma Haley. Her voice was tight with emotion. "Is it true what you posted about the wedding bill?" I told her about Mom brushing aside my modest wedding plans, about their insistence on making everything bigger and more expensive, about the email with the bill that arrived right after our honeymoon, and about how James and I had to give up our house down payment to pay them back. The line was quiet for a long moment after I finished. Then Grandma took a deep breath. "Listen to me, Haley. You focus on taking care of yourself and James. I'll deal with your parents." "Grandma, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. I've watched them treat you like a second-class citizen your entire life. But this is a new low, even for them." Her voice hardened. "Don't worry about them anymore. I'll handle it." After we hung up, I spent the next hour blocking my parents on every platform I could think of: phone, email, social media, everything. I was done with their games, done with their manipulation, done with hoping they'd change. A week after my social media post, I was making dinner when someone started pounding on our front door. James was working late, so I was alone. When I opened it, I found my mother standing there, face red with fury. "How dare you?" she screamed, pushing past me into the house. "How dare you go running to your grandmother with your lies?" I stood my ground, keeping my voice steady. "I didn't lie about anything. You sent me a bill. I paid it, and then I showed everyone the truth when you tried to make me look bad. You've ruined everything." She was practically hysterical now. "Your grandmother changed her will because of you. Do you have any idea what you've done?" That was news to me. "What are you talking about?" "She's leaving almost everything to you." Mom's voice cracked. "The house, her savings, everything. Monica gets some small amounts, and your father and I get nothing, and it's all your fault." I stood there, processing this information while my mother continued her tirade. "We had it all planned out," she ranted. "We took out a second mortgage for Monica's wedding, but it was fine because we were going to pay it off with the inheritance. Your grandmother was supposed to split everything equally." Suddenly, all the pieces clicked into place. "That's why you insisted on paying for my wedding," I said slowly. "You thought you'd get the money back from Grandma's inheritance anyway." "Of course, but now look what you've done. We're drowning in debt, and you've turned your grandmother against us." I couldn't help but laugh, which only made her angrier. "Well, you just got $100,000 from me for my wedding. That should help with your debt." Mom's face flushed darker. "We already spent that money, but that's not the point. You need to fix this. Go to your grandmother. Tell her we've made up, that it was all a big misunderstanding." "No." "What do you mean, no?" "You owe us this." I felt a calm settle over me. "I don't owe you anything. Not anymore. Your financial problems are exactly that. Yours. I'm not lying to Grandma to help you get money you were never entitled to in the first place. You ungrateful little." Without another word, I walked to the door, opened it, and gestured for her to leave. When she didn't move, I simply pushed her out of the apartment, closed the door in her face, locked it, and walked away. She kept screaming and pounding on the door for another 10 minutes before finally giving up. The next day, Monica called. "How could you do this to them?" she demanded. "They gave you everything, just like they gave me, and this is how you repay them." "They didn't give me anything, Monica. They sent me a bill." "They're your parents. They sacrificed so much for us." "No," I corrected her. "They sacrificed for you. I was just the backup plan for their retirement fund." She called me cruel and heartless before hanging up. And just like that, I lost my sister too. But you know what? I'm okay with that. I still see Grandma regularly. She comes over for dinner every Sunday, and we talk on the phone almost daily. Sometimes people ask me if I miss my family, and I tell them the truth. I miss the family I wished I had, but I don't miss the family that actually existed. I've learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is close the door on toxic relationships, even when those relationships are with your own parents.